Unwarranted music opinion. I don't care if you don't want to hear my opinion about your album.
Welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions. I'm Jacob Lindberg, here with Brian Courtney.
Hello.
And Chaz Jenkins.
What up?
And this is a show in which we all choose an album, force each other to listen to it, and reconvene to discuss them, and see just how much we have to throttle each other when we disagree. We have a guest this week in Tanner Boyd, who's also here at Morehead State Public Radio.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And we're going to start off with his pick.
The album is like Clockwork. It's by Queens of the Stone Age, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to pick it and discuss it because we actually use one of the songs in our rotation in the newsroom, also my choice. We use the song Smooth Sailing off the album as our sports stinger, and I just thought it'd be kind of fun to bring it, and I like the album, and I thought you guys would probably like the rest of it, and that's why I picked it.
Dude, Smooth Sailing's so good.
Smooth Sailing is fantastic. So I heard this album the year it came out in, I think, 2014. It was on my radar, and it was one of the years that I was first really keeping up with new releases, and I really, really liked it then. Usually I'm not a huge fan of this sound and the style that Queens of the Stone Age kind of work in, but I felt that Like Clockwork was just a lot more musically, lyrically, and just sonically different and varied and sometimes emotional than the rest of their work. I think this is a pretty much a great hard rock, stoner rock, whatever you want to call it, alt rock album. The elements of like funk that you have thrown in here on If I Had a Tail and Smooth Sailing in particular are fantastic. The last two tracks of the album are a really great kind of emotional high and then low and then high again. There are a couple songs that I'm not super, super hot on, but they're still pretty good. Like I Sat by the Ocean and The Vampire of Time and Memory. Just a little bit too, I guess, standard hard rock for me.
The Vampire of Time and Memory sounds like a James Bond soundtrack song.
It's a really good song. I think I feel the same way as you about I Sat by the Ocean, but like Vampire of Time and Memory, like it's probably my second favorite track, if not my favorite.
I never thought about the James Bond thing before. That's pretty spot on, actually. And I'm surprised that you don't like I Sat by the Ocean, because I thought that riff is like Groot.
Oh, it's still really good. Like, don't get me wrong. I just don't love it at the same level as like Fairweather Friends or another track on the album.
Or even like I like the intro track as well.
Oh, the intro is a great way to get things off. Yeah, the super... Because you know from the get-go that this is not going to be like a standard Queens of the Stone Age album. Like they're trying something new with that deep and kind of like just
the
plodding
guitar
bass.
tones on this album is pretty stellar. I don't want to say I've heard it before, but it's just different enough where it's not something I usually hear typically in music like in this genre. It was very surprising to hear this deep and guttural sound used in their sound.
It's very foreboding, like, and it's an interesting choice to start the album off because they could have started it with like I Sat by the Ocean.
I don't know the story exactly, but I know something happened to Josh Homme, the lead singer.
He had a failed knee surgery.
Yeah, it was what happened was he started choking on oxygen tubes in the middle of his surgery. And it just caused the surgery to be botched, and it took him a while to get used to, getting back into singing. It's what one of the songs on here is about, actually.
I Appear Missing.
And it's what the inspiration for Fairweather Friends is about, because he had some friends who were there in his time of need, and some weren't, and he wrote about the song about the people who weren't there for him.
So I Appear Missing is about a botched knee surgery.
Yeah, it's about, I called it the emotional centerpiece of the album in my notes, and I think it's probably the best track.
I think one of my favorite things, and it's present in a lot of the tracks within the album, is the use of tension within them. And I think one of the best examples is the guitar solo in that track. Whenever it goes, it's like right before it has that drum roll, the boom, and then wah, that kind of deal.
Yeah,
I think that, and then like there's that breakdown in Smooth Sailing. Right at the very
It's so good, man. Like that song, it comes in, and in my head, I'm like Tanner Boyd here, but like also like, but after I got past that, like kind of basically making a meme out of it in my head, like, yeah, that song is amazing, dude. Like, oh my god, it's so catchy, and like I love how like mocking it is. And honestly, coming out of the end of Fairweather Friends with like the little vocal quip, and then right into this. Whew.
Yeah, talking about transitions on this album, they're all fantastic, and not just from track to track, but from verse to chorus, from chorus to bridge. I never feel like, even when these tracks take a huge shift, like on My God is the Sun, where it gets really quiet and gets really loud.
Lyrically,
it never seems forced, and it always just flows super well.
What is that song? It's so strange and like really good. I love that when he's like, the sun will heal you, but like like the heat will kill you and that will heal you. It's so like abstract. Like that song is like a really big like moment for me on the album because it's tonally like completely different in terms of lyrics and like the message, but man, like it's super intense and poetic. And that's another thing, this album is super good lyrically, really not a single bad moment on here.
I really enjoy some of the band people that come in to help with this album, like Dave Grohl's on a lot of the drums, and of course he brings it.
What instrument makes this album? For me, it's the pianos.
The pianos are never feel forced, because like sometimes you get an album like this, you get like a hard rock band and they try to do like a ballad or something, and they'll throw in piano, and it's like, okay, here we go. Here though, like every little instrumental choice I feel just works super well.
I think it's the guitar, especially in I Appear Missing. That guitar riff near the end of the song is actually pretty beautiful.
And the huge Tony, like so almost like, in my opinion, like very slightly noise rock guitars towards the end of like Clockwork, like they're creating this huge atmosphere.
That song has levels, like dynamics, whatever you want to call it. Whenever it just swells like a bell curve, you know, it just it goes and has that big peak right in the middle, and then goes back down to that weird little quiet kind of thing going on with it, and then back to the lyrics. I don't know if you can even be able to put this on air, but one of my favorite lines in any song ever is in Smooth Sailing with blow my load over the status quo.
Yeah, it's so funny. The way he delivers it, too, is complete. Like, he's aware that it's really crude, so he just says it like a teenager. It's awesome.
You get more of that on If I Had a Tail as well. Like, it's just this, like, weird, like, vaguely sexual, I mean, in that instance, it was pretty explicitly sexual, but, like, strange imagery that doesn't quite make sense, but it has this like attitude to it that it just makes it really interesting.
It's in like an admiral attitude. It doesn't come off as like snobbish or childish. My favorite line is on If I Had a Tail. It's one of my favorite lines. There's so many on the album though. Expensive holes to bury things, the way he says that, and I think that leads like right into the second chorus. Like, it's super good. I mean, man, it's all around quality. Like, there's really no low point. Like, we get like a cool down with Collapsia. I might be saying that wrong. But I mean,
the fact that it comes right in the middle of the album, and then Fairweather Friends is after it. It's in between two really loud, almost uplifting songs. So again, it just kind of demonstrates how this really, really works from a front to back album experience.
Yeah, and each track is money. There's really no filler on here. If I had any complaints, like, I mean, I think the singing on Collapsia is a little shaky, a little flawed. I'm not totally into it. I think, like, when we get to like Clockwork, like, he's really killing it. Like, at that, like, I think he makes up for it there. I wouldn't even say I'm let down on Collapsia. It's just, it's not great.
I would
It's still really good.
Funny enough, preparing for this show, I almost forgot to listen to my own album again.
Right.
Because I just worn it out at some point. And I was like, I should probably give it a re-listen. And then I actually had never really noticed the keys in a lot of it before, but especially like in Fairweather Friends, it's like just right underneath everything. You kind of hear it go. I'm like, oh,
it kills it, man. That piano makes that song. This is as densely produced as like an Andrew WK album, and that's what I kept thinking of. I've really not been surprised by the quality of an album since we did I Get Wet, like on the first episode. Like, this is like, honestly, like mind-blowingly good. Like, when I think about it, it was the one I wanted to go back to the most out of all the new stuff I heard. Like, absolutely.
I love how just groovy this album is, and how it gets sometimes, where like Keep Your Eyes Peeled and If I Had a Tail and Fairweather Friends and Smooth Sailing, just how groovy it is. It's also, fun fact, in Fairweather Friends, Elton John makes an appearance as the backup vocals. I thought that was pretty stellar. So you got him and Dave Grohl. I love Dave Grohl's drumming. He adds so much to the songs that he's featured on. And there's typical drummer, he makes an appearance too, but I really like the songs that have the drumming that he's on, because when you got Dave Grohl behind the kid, you can never go wrong. I think my favorite song, it's hard to choose because a lot of them I like pretty equally, but I think Fairweather Friends is probably my favorite song. I wouldn't say it's the best song. I think the best song on it is Like Clockwork. I think that's the best song on the album. I think it's just a stellar closer. But I Appear Missing is pretty amazing too.
That's my favorite one.
Especially at the end. That beautiful riff is just, god damn, it's so good.
I don't know, man. I'm just gonna have to go with the normie pick. Go Smooth Sailing. Every time it comes on,
yeah.
that like I'm right along with it. I'm like, and the way, like, as soon as he starts singing, I'm like, oh yeah, it's awesome, man. It's so good. It's like the one I was singing along with. Oh, that vocal line. It's smooth sailing.
So, what do you all think about Josh Homme's voice? Because I think, like, to hear it, like, initially, it's, like, not necessarily, like, something special, but then just how he makes it work within his own style.
It's unique. I mean, it's, you know, I could pick him out of a lineup.
You know, and I love how he goes for it. When he goes in that falsetto, it's not clean, it's not smooth, it's not even good. It's just when he does it with such charisma.
I think he's
Yeah.
a really good singer.
He's a very
Oh no, he's a
charismatic
great singer.
and I
It's
think-
just when he does that falsetto, he knows that I'm not a trained singer. I don't know what I'm doing here. But when he does it and goes for it, I love just how charismatic it is.
He's got a lot of swagger and charisma, and the thing is, it's not across the entirety of the album. He does show vulnerability on songs like I Appear Missing in the closer. So he's got personality, and you see both sides of that personality on this thing. And I think that's really what sets Queens of the Stone Age on this album in particular apart, is they don't just feel like a faceless bunch of musicians pounding out a few decent to good hard rock songs. They feel like a unit that is making something that's been thought about and just whittled down to the best moments that they can have.
Yeah, and talking about, like, starting off the album with Keep Your Eyes Peeled and how, I mean, just how chunky that, I think it's a bass, just starting with the...
Oh yeah, it's like distorted or something.
Yeah, and then I think just the harmonies that they have in the chorus, and how everyone's voice kind of works together there. I don't know. I just does it for me.
Yeah. This is great. If I had to pick like my favorite aspect of it, it's probably the variety. We get a lot of good abstract, a lot of like lyricism, and like it's all under this kind of hard rock, alt rock kind of touches of stoner rock playing. But we get abstract lyrics and like some weirder moments. We get some straightforward, like, you know, catchy, like almost dad rock tunes. Kind of like not in a bad way, but like, you know, I could definitely see
Just some rock and roll, you know?
Right, yeah. Some like, you know, rock
Rock's
and roll.
not dead, man.
Yeah, dude. And some really like bittersweet and like vulnerable moments too, man. Yeah, it's really good. Not a lot to complain about. Like decent, strong 8, honestly.
Well,
I'm going to go with like a light to decent 8 on this one. It still holds up from the first time I heard it. It was like in my top 5 of the year the first time I heard it, and I would say it's in that same spot today. It's surprised me, and I still think it's their best album, like by a decent margin.
I'm gonna go with a light 8 on this because I really enjoy it, but I don't love it. You know, this is a band that I've known about, but I never like taken time to listen to, and I think this is a good introduction to the band in general because there's a lot to love about this album. But I'm glad I did listen to it, and I would probably go back to a few of these songs. But maybe just this type of hard rock isn't my cup of tea, you know, in general. But for what this band I've known about them, and to hear this from them, I was very surprised. This was a genuinely good album that I really did enjoy more I listened to it.
I don't disagree with anything you all said. I'm probably going to give it like a 9 or a 9.5 just because it's probably just entirely personal taste.
Well, that's the only thing that matters, really.
Yeah. I mean, just I've had this playing in my car so many times since it came out that I don't know. I just always go back to it, and I love it.
We're going to talk about Clipping. They're experimental hip-hop group, which is pretty much my bread and butter on this show at this point, from West Coast, California. I got into them via a Fantano rec, but what was crazy about getting into them was I already knew the vocalist, the rapper, Daveed Diggs, because I had watched Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which he is in which he plays a rapping history professor. And he was also in Hamilton, both of which I came to before I got to this. So I had a moment like when I was first getting into Clipping and just listening to their self-titled, which is the record we're going to talk about.
Who does he play in Hamilton?
He's Thomas Jefferson.
What?
Yeah, dude, I know. How do you think I felt?
What?
Look, guys, it's more people on NPR talking about Hamilton.
Yeah. Not like this. Anyway, the two producers are whose first names are on this Wikipedia here are Diggs and Hudson. So they've been friends since they were younger and like went to college together as well. And those two are huge into noise music and like harsh noise. And we get a lot of those elements here in the production. Their self-titled is a little long. It's 50 minutes for a rap album. It's a little long. It's a little long-winded because this isn't conceptual or anything. It's just essentially a collection of tracks that are loosely bound together by thematics, really. But I'll just turn it over to you all. I, of course, love this album. It's one of my favorites we're talking about on the show. And I've got to bring to the show because I've just been addicted to it for like 2 months. But I was curious to see what you all would say.
All right. So, of all the experimental hip-hop I've listened to on the show, my favorite will still be JPEG Mafia.
Yeah, and I need to rectify my score of like a strong 6. That's like a decent 7 now. Thinking back on it, if I had to re-give that album a score, as far as experimental hip-hop goes.
This album is very flawed. And it's a shame because the potential here is so frustrating of what it's doing and what it could be doing.
I almost like every song.
So let's take it. I think this is an album we should take it track by track because I think that will help.
I think that is important. Yeah, we should do that.
So the intro is a great way to start things off. It gets you hyped. It's noisy. It reminds me of JPEG Mafia, Death Grips, that industrial.
But I do think it's its own thing. And I think that when you lump all of the quote-unquote industrial hip-hop together, like JPEG Mafia, Death Grips, clipping, it's like the easiest possible comparison to make.
Well, they're all different in their own right. I think
I wouldn't even go as far as to say they're
difficult.
Each of them are super distinct. Like I would never in my life think a Death Grip song was a JPEG Mafia song, and I would never think either of their songs was a clipping song, and I would never think it goes like I would never mistake them because what clipping does that's different from them, JPEG Mafia's experimentation is more rooted in contemporary trap music.
The closest thing I could come to for a comparison that I know of for clipping would be Dalek, for sure. 100%.
Yeah, which is I'm unfamiliar with, but I do know of.
So this intro kicks things off to a pretty good start. Like he just starts going off.
The verse is super good, like super quick, technical.
I never had a problem with any of the rapping itself. I thought all the rapping and the flow of the delivery of everything, I actually thought it was great throughout the entire thing.
I think lyrically, though, JPEG Veteran is still the better album of all the experimental we've listened to.
We'll just talk about it out in a vacuum, Don't think about it comparatively.
Lyrically, this is a pretty decent album overall. There are some lines, especially from some of the featured artists, that I don't really care for.
Sure.
Overall, the lead dude, Diggs, he does bring it up to the plate.
Yeah, I think the intro definitely promises just the intensity from this album. The fact that he's just rapping over these high noise tones and you get that just explosion of harsh noise at the end.
It's like 50 seconds, and by the time we get to the end, I know it's a super short track, and it's far from being, like, it is a standout, but, it's not a whole song, but, like, I mean, by the time we get to that explosion, it is pretty cathartic, and then right into the next song.
Yeah, it's one of the most uniquely clipping moments on the album. Like, it's one of the moments on the album where I feel like their identity is fully fleshed out, even though it's a less than 1 minute song where he's just rapping over, like, a noise tone, like, that's where I feel they really flourish, like, because it feels like it's really clipping. I don't feel. And there's a lot of other moments on this album where I feel like they have a little bit of an identity crisis and they don't really know what style they're trying to do, and sometimes the sounds don't come together in a way that's really very flattering.
So, what are some of your favorite tracks on here?
Favorite tracks are Body and Blood.
Yes.
Work, Summertime. Get Up is my favorite.
Wow.
Get Up is all 100% the best song on this album. And by a mile.
And Inside Out and Story 2. Those are my favorite tracks.
Dang, you didn't like Taking Off? Oh, I was hoping you guys would like Taking Off. That's kind of a grower for me.
I will say that, let's see, what was it? Dream and Get Up had the appropriate effects for me because I about killed myself on the way to work one morning because I was nodding off during Dream. It's very, chill, and then Get Up kicks off and it's literally an alarm tone, and so I snap awake on the interstate there, and the reason I didn't like Get Up, and it's kind of the same feeling towards a lot of them. It was like I kept waiting for the songs to take off, and then they never did. Like whenever Get Up switches from the alarm tone to having like that chord progression with the alarm tone, like from instead of the
It's underneath the chorus.
Like I'm like, okay, yeah, this is about to turn into something, and then it goes right back to the alarm tone. I'm like, oh, okay.
I get that. Yeah, because
I actually kind of like that.
I like that. I get what you're saying because, like you said, you like Body and Blood, and each chorus on that track they add a new harsh noise. Like the first chorus is a little lackluster compared to the other, because the second one there's like it sounds like just a drill, just being.
I love that drill.
Yeah. Oh, it's so loud and amazing.
I love that drill, guys.
That's a great drill, everyone.
I think Get Up is my favorite song.
Get Up is
because
great.
it's the first time on this album where it feels genuine. It feels earned. A lot of these tracks, especially Tonight, oh God, what a shitty song. What made me love Veteran so much compared to all the other ones is that it was so visceral and genuine, and it felt like we were digging deep into this guy's mind. This seems like a guy who's like, I'm going to do an industrial hip-hop album, and as Jacob mentioned, Identity Crisis, it's so apparent on a lot of these tracks where he doesn't know what he wants to be, so when he does do something kind of like crazy and out there, it just feels like I'm doing this because it's popular, or that's what is gonna get me, attention from people. It doesn't feel like he's... Does that make sense?
I agree with part of what you're saying. I think that sometimes the industrial elements don't really mesh. And one of my examples is Or Die, the song right after Get Up. Here's a 4-minute track during which the feature outshines Diggs again, and random sounds count as experimental production. And I feel like another thing that is keeping me from really, really enjoying this is I feel like they write a good hook like a quarter of the time. And even on tracks that I really, really enjoy, like Body and Blood and Work, I'm not that into the choruses and the hooks. Like the Get That Work hook, I'm just, okay, whatever. I wish it would be on the verse. I love the production on the verse. Whatever that sound is,
I think
I have no idea what it is, but it
yeah.
sounds fantastic. The second verse with, I don't remember her name, but it's very good.
Her verse absolutely murders anything he could have brought in. She not only technically but like lyrically destroys it.
Diggs is good, but I feel like every time they bring in a feature, most of the time the feature outshines him.
I don't think that outshines him most of the time. I agree on Work it does, but for me the whole song is so quality. But like I think they're perfect features like to accent his verses. Cause
honestly, the one song that has the like an actual solid hook is Inside Out.
Get Up has a great chorus. That's like one great chorus.
Is Inside Out
on
the
this
one
album.
about where he's like, "There's a war coming."
Yeah.
That is, I love that.
Yeah, it's
that
awesome,
visceral,
man.
like,
I'm glad you brought that up.
Screech between each line. Oh my God,
the last verse on that song. There are a couple of killer verses from Diggs on here. Specifically, the last verse of Work. You don't know about that district that they talk about. Like you've never been to that district they talk about. I like that this album seems to be a collection of stories about a place. Like that's how I read it. It's it's a very much like disadvantaged neighborhood. It's a dangerous place. There's killings and gang violence and drugs use.
There's a woman who's killing and eating people.
Yeah, she is. She's the standout, really.
In Body and Blood, I think that the flow in that chorus, that just gets me going. She don't need you for shit, but in your veins and your guts. Oh yeah,
yeah.
That's exactly like. The way that song makes me move is like the thing that I look for in a rap song.
Right.
That, dun, dun.
And the fact that and that's where like the kind of harsh noise and like industrial like elements really like bring the album to a high, because like I think a song like Get Up doesn't really make it without. I like when you said that it seems like random noise. I don't think a song like Get Up gets by without those noises. For me, that song is enhanced by the production.
But then we have moments like Williams Mix, which just is such a perplexing ending to this album.
So it's sort of like I think with the last two tracks we get Dominoes and Ends. I think Dominoes is maybe my least favorite. It has like the child chorus.
Yeah, I don't like
it. It gets so annoying near the end. It's like, wrap it up.
And they have
it's a little long. That song does go on long. And Ends is good. I like Ends. I like the idea of Ends and the chorus as well, but I think the production sort of lacks here. I think it doesn't quite stick the landing. Williams Mix is fine. I don't love or hate it.
It's just... Ends it should have been the end of the album. It's a great ending. It makes sense. It makes sense thematically. It makes sense for the album listening experience.
Closer.
But why is this? There's a 4 freaking minute just garbled sound. It just feels so. What I was talking about earlier, that like this doesn't feel genuine.
Unwarranted.
It feels unwarranted. Yeah.
Wow.
It feels tacky. Feels tacky and
It feels tacked on. Yeah, and the reason for that, let's say, for example, they had more of stuff like Body and Blood and Get Up, more and
Work, Summertime. Basically the first
Work,
four tracks are
Inside Out, like that chorus, that noise that comes in. If they had more of that on this album, I think Williams' mix might be more warranted. But I feel like a lot of the times, the intensity and the, I guess to use the word noise again, that is promised on the introduction barely shows up on this album. Like, it shows up on a few tracks, and I listened to this thing 4 times just continually trying to hear like new things in the production, and some tracks did kind of start shining more on more listens, like Summertime. I really like the laid back bass line on that album. The Diggs vocal delivery, it's one of the best on the album. But I'm not really that sure about the like little bells and whistles that pop up near the end of it. I felt like I didn't really understand the point of them. Another track is Or Die, where it just seems like random sounds that, and it doesn't seem like it is thought through fully, like the way Get Up is, where they are taking this idea and really pushing it to its limit rather than barely expanding upon it like it has on a few tracks here.
And it's confusing because if you're just looking at these track titles, I love the track listing. How you have Get Up, Or Die is the next track, and that fits in with the theme of the song. Yeah, that fits with the song of Get Up. God, like, I love those little moments of how, like, they clearly had an album listening experience in mind here, but then why is just Dominoes is so long, Williams' mix is so long. Like, Williams' mix should have been a minute just like the intro was. That would have been a tighter ending if you have to do that.
And the thing is, like, the lyrics across the board are really good. Like, I really like the lyrics on Taking Off.
Yeah.
But the production is okay. Like, it's pretty cool, but the track goes on pretty long. It gets kind of stale. The chorus is okay. And I feel like that's what's really holding this album back. It's hard to bring myself to care all that much about what's being said because the instrumentals, for the most part, just aren't hooking me in. Like, Story 2, like, it's an interesting lyrical concept. I just don't really like the like sci-fi synth sounds. I feel like they come out of nowhere.
Really? Do you like when the track picks up? Like, when that track picks up, it really blows my mind.
I mean, I like the idea of it, and I really like the story that's being told. I think his delivery is really energetic and intense, but it feels like a start of an idea.
So
and it makes it hard for me to get emotionally invested.
So, Brian, whenever you were, I mean, you've been burning this album out for like 2 months now.
Yeah.
Whenever you get to Williams' mix and it becomes the last 2 minutes of the album and it is just garbled foolishness, do you listen to it?
Yeah, usually. Like, by the time I get to Dominoes or Ends, I'm usually kind of checking out a little bit. Because at this point, I've heard the album through enough times to know what I think of it as a piece, and I'm kind of going back to specific songs or like hearing songs in the order they were intended to be heard on the album. But like, Williams' mix isn't something I pick out alone, obviously.
Right.
Like, it's basically just kind of like, for me, it's basically the B-side to the whole album. It's like, and we threw this together. We had fun mixing this together. It's very much like for the band, I think. Of like, it's not meant to be totally interesting. It's just made of samples of the songs that we've heard throughout and different stems of them.
So did it grow on you guys, like, each listen through? Because it really did for me, because I absolutely hated it the first time that I listened.
Right. I did, and I want to say, as high as I'm going to score this album, I was probably right where you were on like second listen. But I just kept going. Something about like Body. There were songs I liked, but like Body and Blood kept me coming back, and I was like, well, I'll listen through. And like the first 4 tracks really hooked me. And then like once I start paying attention to like Dream or like Taking Off, which is one of my favorites now, just lyrically, even though some of the quieter songs aren't quite as punchy or catchy to me as the other cuts, like the first handful or Get Up, it doesn't matter because like lyrically they're super interesting. The production is not as great, but it's still there. It holds the song together, which is fine when David is giving such an interesting story. And that's the thing about this album. It's not a personal experience type of thing. I'm just really enamored by the stories he's telling on this record. Pretty much every single one of them lands with me. I think they're all super detailed, super well thought out. Really nothing left to the imagination. they're vivid and they're visceral, and even though they're mostly coming from dark places, and some of them kind of have the, like you said on Taking Off, and kind of the sci-fi feel. Some of them are a little surreal, like Dream. They're all very grounded in reality. And for me, when I get that kind of down-to-earthness, and the down-to-earthness of the writing, the technical and actually good technical delivery of the lyrics, interesting lyrics, great beat work, like amazing instrumentals, like for me, pretty much across the board. I mean, this thing is like really hard to deny. Like, you know, I kind of came into it like first or second listen. I was like, I don't really get it. And even Tonight, which is most people's least favorite song on the whole album, because David is not a singer, it grew on me so much. Like, and now when it comes on, I'm like as excited. Like, I'm as excited as any other track.
Yeah, but all of you said is debunked because Tonight is in this album. I cannot comprehend what this guy was thinking. I'm going to have this body and blood, work about gang violence and murder and summertime, about how like people still die in this best moment of the year.
It's like, yeah, it may be pretty outside, but people are still, you know, getting destroyed.
Or story changes. 2 about an ex-arsonist whose family's killed in a house fire.
And that one is so interesting. And the lyrics kind of falter maybe towards the second verse.
It doesn't matter because this guy asks who's fucking tonight. What the hell is he thinking with that? And Gangsta Boo, ew. What?
The verse is pretty good.
So you asked if it grew on me. Yeah. I listened to this thing 4 times and it grew off me. I actually enjoyed this the most the first listen.
Okay.
You know, the first listen, the intro through Summertime, when I was listening to this for the first time, I was like, oh man, this is something else. And I still think those first 4 tracks are pretty freaking good.
I had the exact same experience as Jacob.
However, the more I listened to it, the more I felt that the production aspects that were initially interesting, I felt like they didn't really have much of a purpose. And
God,
I felt like the songs here... Let me name the songs that I think really succeed on this album, because there are a couple songs I just love on this album.
For the record, I do agree with I could see your criticism rather of the instrumentals not. They seem like they're built and then the song is written over it. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of I could see that perspective a little bit.
It feels like they're kind of throwing everything at a wall and seeing what sticks a little bit, except for the intro. I think is a great way to start it off. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the hooks on Body and Blood and Work, the production is great. Summertime's really good. Work?
Yeah, I like work.
Dream, actually, I really like, because I feel like it knows exactly what it wants to be. This like really dreamlike moment. I like the bell that rings and kind of warbles throughout the entirety of the verse. I like the really minimal drum beat and the delivery on that. I feel like that's a track where they had a really solid idea and they expanded on it, and they didn't try a whole bunch of things in one song. They got one idea, and they narrowed it down to that. And the way that flows into the best song on the album, Get Up, which has a great chorus. The alarm clock beat is great. The fact that at the end of a song, it goes back to the unaltered, just initial sample, I think is really, really cool, and it kind of puts it into perspective, like what you were listening to the whole time, I feel like, for me. Or Die, I don't care for. Inside Out, I just don't like the synths. I don't really care for the vocal sample. Not the Damn When I Was 22 sample. That's a great sample. But the sample that kind of goes on throughout the majority of the verses. I think the use of noise in that track is actually really cool. When you get those sci-fi synths, I'm checking out. Dominoes, the piano feels like a weird attempt at making some kind of cathartic release. It doesn't go over well. The children's chorus doesn't work. Dig's vocals on that track are really stilted. It doesn't grab me. It doesn't matter if the lyrics are good because the song just doesn't work for me. And Ends is okay, but at that point on the album, I'm kind of done with it. And then we get Williams' mix, and I feel like it's just not earned. Like if a lot of the songs on this album had that intensity that is promised from the very start, then maybe having the end of the album be an explosion of noise and sounds would be like a really fitting way to put a cap on the whole thing. But it feels like they didn't do that, so it just kind of feels unwarranted and unearned, and it just doesn't really make much sense for this song to even be on the album. I don't know.
Is this your favorite Clipping album?
Of the 2 I've heard?
Of the two? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, they only have 3. They have and actually their EP is very good as well. But yeah, this is probably the far away favorite. I think maybe their debut could top it because there's some interesting things on there. But as far as this album goes, like by the time I'm done with it, and I feel like I might be done with it for a little while, I do get some of the criticisms, but damn man, like I just can't deny it. I don't know. I really enjoy it. You know, even if I understand your perspective, I don't necessarily share it.
Oh, yeah, I can see the appeal to this thing for sure, and some of the tracks really do.
And if you know, if you guys have had to listen to everything, you could pretty much tell like this is like okay, this is probably kind of a Brian, like this is right up Brian's alley. Yeah, decent 9 on its worst day, a light 9. It's great. I really adore it. I can't wait for them to do more. And their album after this is like a concept album, and it's just as good. And I think the noise is even better in some parts.
This is a band that I want to keep an eye on because they have potential and they do succeed with that potential on this album. I just feel like there's a lot of things holding it back. I'm going with like a light to decent 6 on this thing. It was...
It's a bit of a slog for you, it feels like.
It's a slog, and even though there are songs I like, just the thought of coming back to it, I just... Like on Tonight, the chorus, there's the beat switch, which is good, and I'm like, oh man, we're finally done with that chorus, and then it comes back. It like tricks you into thinking it's gone, and then it comes back.
Oh my, that is the worst part of the album.
It's back.
Oh god, it's like a 7-minute song.
All right,
There's just so many moments on this album I'm throwing my hands up in frustration. Really.
I feel the same as Jacob, but not as hard, not as harshly. I think I'm going to go with a light 7 on this. It was probably going to be more of a stronger 7, but just the more we talk about it, and just Jacob's totally right about a lot of the criticisms of this. This is such a disappointing experience for me because when it's good, it's really good. But when it's low, it's so disappointingly and frustratingly low. That's like, man, imagine what this could be. Imagine just how better this album would be if some of the tracks were scrapped out or changed up a bit and take out the mix. Because it's so obvious there's a lot of thought and care put into this, especially with the track listing, some of the themes talked about here. But with tracks like Tonight and some of the just less than stellar production moments, especially near the back half of the album, it just really leaves me scratching my head and wanting more. I still think JPEG Mafia is the best of everything we've heard experimental-wise.
I do want to make a quick point before we end this discussion and Tanner, you talk about it a little bit. I never feel like this is disingenuous. I feel like the concepts behind this album and every song here, like I never feel like they are just hopping on a trend or anything like that. Like
I think they know what they're doing as well. Like,
exactly.
I only feel that a few times. Because I feel that on Tonight, but then I'm switched back up when we hear a song like Get Up. So I'm just kind of back and forth with that. I don't think that is the case for the whole album. Just certain moments I feel like you're just doing this because it's part of the genre.
I never really feel like that. I just think it's the execution.
I'm probably going to give it a 6, but that isn't in a bad way by any means. I mean, when I on first listen, probably give it about a 3. I mean, I just... Industrial really is not my bag at all, but it grew on me a lot more than I thought it would, and there are parts that I do really like, and I do have some friends that are really into industrial stuff, and I'm going to tell them to check out Clipping, and they're probably going to think I'm really cool.
Yeah, and that's all, and that's what this is all about, really. Clout, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I was harsh on it, but I do like if someone put this on in the background, I wouldn't be like, oh, turn that off. Like I'd still like this album.
So was Tonight.
I just think it has major flaws. So the album that I chose is the 2014 modern classic Benji by Sun Kil Moon. And this is a little bit of a sequel episode because we have listened to an album by frontman Mark Kozlik, the 1992 release Down Colorful Hill by Red House Painters. And this being released more than 2 decades later, you can really see a shift in musical direction. This album is an hour long, and it consists of 11 tracks where Mark basically has this half-spoken word, half-singing delivery over fairly minimal folk instrumentals. Occasional bits of folk rock come up in here, and the lyrics that are almost like he is reading to you from his diary, or something like that. Like he's just talking to you about something that happened, or his thoughts on something. Now, I listened to this when it first came out. I adored it then, I adore it now, so what do you all think about it?
Man, I feel bad for the guy. This comes off like almost a therapy session. You know, I mean, people keep dying in aerosol can fires, and then he goes on to, he has that one song that's Prayers for Newtown.
Oh man,
Which
that
is a
one,
fantastic song. That might be my favorite one on it.
dude. That song, like every time it comes on, like it's like a tearjerker for real.
That
Like,
was written in 2014.
yeah, and on his latest release, he just had another like, and then the release before that, and the release before that about shit like.
And what it puts me in mind of, like, when it starts off anyway, Jacob, you might have listened to it, but it sounds a lot like, almost like an Alice in Chains Unplugged album. Whenever it first gets going, it has kind of like that really doom, doom, doom.
I can kind of see that, yeah.
Carissa is like an outlier for me. This track has grown on me a lot lyrically, but like it's instrumentally, it's one of the ones I have a tougher time remembering.
I really like Carissa. I really love the guitar tuning
It's
he's
a
using. It's like a
strange
low
start.
C open. The finger picking pattern is really nice, I think.
And what I was reading about it is the first song that he wrote on it was Truck Driver, which is about Carissa's grandpa getting killed. That's just interesting to me. It's like, that's how we're gonna get it rolling. That's what we're gonna base this album around. But then it like goes into the relationships and sexual experiences and all. It just covers so much ground for it just to start about like thinking about death.
It's like semi-biographical. It's sort of
very existential.
It's one of
Yeah.
the most introspective albums I think I've ever heard. And I think lyrically, this album shines so much. It's kind of scary how well this album is lyrically.
Because here's the thing, he's not writing anything poetic or like artsy.
It's very...
He's just talking, dude.
The term, like, you mentioned that, like, diary writing style of lyricism, like Rivers Cuomo is very infamous for that style, but I think this does it in such a finer way. It's so much more tight. How much detail this guy goes into about his father, his mother, Carissa, Jim Wise. I watched the film The Song Remains the Same. The guy pretty much just tells us about his entire life in a 10-minute song, and it's so detailed. I see myself in the theater with him watching that film. I see myself sitting with him on the couch watching wrestling matches with his father and Jim Wise. I see myself in the restaurant he talks about in Ben's My Friend when he's like kind of just not in a good spot with it when he's with his girlfriend.
Blue crab cake.
Blue crab shit. It's mind blowing.
You do sports bar shit again without me interrupting it?
Sports bar shit.
All right, cool. Send me
Thank
that
you.
later.
I didn't know what I was expecting when I was listening to this, but just, man, when I really listened to the lyrics and this very minimal acoustic guitar and bass, it put me in a spot where I just thought about my own life. It's kind of, man, it kind of makes me want to listen to Down Color Hill again, just in that mindset. But this is just leagues beyond Down Color Hill for sure, in my opinion. And I have two complaints. One, I really wish there was more drums on some other songs, because there's moments where the structure of the song makes you think the drums are going to kick in after he does the first verse, but then they never do. Because the songs that do have drums, like I Love My Dad or Dogs, God, Dogs is when this album really kicks off for
Man,
me.
Dogs is like, yeah, and I agree actually, because even though I Can't Live Without My Mother's Love is fantastic, and Carissa and Truck Driver have grown on me quite a bit, like I really feel like Mark catches his stride at Dogs, and almost
the album is just
almost never loses it. Like at that point, like it's damn near flawless.
It's a tight hour.
Yeah, like it's the easiest. It is to this day the easiest hour or longer that I have ever sat through. Like as an album experience.
there's just some songs, some drums would have not taken anything away from it. It would have just added to it. But my actual complaint is some songs he does this thing where he has two of like the same vocal.
Don't say it. If you hate that, oh my fuck.
I don't like it.
I know you would say some dumb shit today, man. I just knew it.
No, listen, because there's one song where it works and there's one song where it just doesn't work. And it's near the end of the album.
If you say the vocals on Richard Ramirez Died Today of Natural Causes aren't good,
No, is that the one where near the end he splits it?
yeah.
Maybe it's not that song. 'Cause
That's-
that song it's good.
It better not be.
What's the other song that he does that? He does it one more
He does
time.
it on Dogs. He does it throughout the album.
He does it a little bit, but it's most noticeable on Richard
Yeah.
Ramirez.
God, then maybe I don't like that. Yeah. Ugh. I like I like the
it be-
vocals. I don't get it. What is the purpose
Oh,
of
I'll tell you, I think it does have a purpose. Richard Ramirez Died Today of Natural Causes is, and of course this is something that we have to glean for ourselves because all of these lyrics are very, very direct and as you said, not very poetic. This is kind of an existential breakdown. He's seeing in the news that this serial killer died of natural causes. He brings up several times in the song people who died of unnatural causes, who were good people. Then he talks about getting older. He's saying, what in the world is wrong with life? And then you have these vocals that come in, he's disoriented, and it's just
Is that the
all
same
of this
one?
running through his mind at the same time. It's cluttered. He's thinking about so many different things, and I think that adds to the tension and the fact that I don't know if existential breakdown is a great way to put it, but it's just a lot of stuff to consider. It's just overwhelming, the idea that life could go this way for one person and in a totally different way for another person.
And is that the same one where he's talking about age of the guy that's coming to drum
Yes.
today, and I feel like I'm gonna have a heart attack when I fuck too hard and stuff anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, like, and I don't know, I love that effect, even just on a surface level, like how it sounds, man. Like on Dogs, that is like, elevates that track to a whole new level when we get those really quiet, just spoken vocals underneath the singing. Like, oh my God, it is like it's the most basic thing you could do in the production. It's like, hey, let's layer my vocals, but it's like some next level songwriting and production. I mean, honest to God, it is one of the most amazing vocal flourishes. Like, cause me, I'm a vocals guy. So like for me, not only is Mark's story standing out, not only is his performance standing out, cause he's a fantastic singer, but he's putting this just spoken bit underneath. And I don't know why it works, man, but that shit is like truly like will forever sound good. Like if you don't like this album, fuck you. But like if I think people will hear this forever, and it doesn't matter if it's a million years from now they dig up a Benji CD from like some nuclear waste and it survived. Like they'll hear that and they'll think it's good.
I think the lyricism and delivery doesn't enough for me. I didn't need it. I think that's my purpose. But also, I love how there's solo work on this. Like, I love My Dad is my favorite track. It makes me so happy.
Dude, it makes me like envy. I'm like, I want a dad.
Hey, if you don't have a dad, you can't have dad issues. Hey.
Yeah. But no, I still have dad issues. It's
Something I loved about that was you think about other dad songs. You've got Father and Son by Cat Stevens or Cats in the Cradle, and how really poetic and tonal they try to be. And then his song is I Love My Dad.
Yeah.
It's
like
just
it's super simple. He's like, I love my dad. Sometimes my
There's
dad
a bunch of reasons why.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. He's like, sometimes my dad got really mad. A little scary. Forgave him for it's been a long time. It just works so well because he's just being so candid.
It's such and you never get the feeling that it would be disingenuous because he's just going into such detail, and it's not like a one-sided thing. Like, the line where he says, I'm not trying to say he was some kind of saint. And you get that all across this album. Like, it's very, very honest.
This is like the prototype for what he's gone on to do as well. And honestly, like, this is probably still the best or second best instance of him using this songwriting style where he is just going, like, for me, he really takes it to a whole new level with his album As Common as Light and Love, Our Red Valleys of Blood. But here, like, there's an emotional factor too throughout each song, and it feels a little more, in fact, way more cohesive.
Oh yeah, he's actually singing on some of these songs rather than just talking.
But I mean, man, like, I don't even know what else to say. Like, this release is a pretty popular one. It's been talked about a lot. Now, you have a point about this album though that you like to make.
Yes, yeah. This album comes out and everybody's like, man, this is such a depressing album. It's the most depressing album ever. This Mark Kozlik's making a bunch of depressing albums. You're right. It isn't.
I thought it was on first listen,
Yeah.
but then I thought about it, and it's like the only depressing song is Jim Wise, but each song, as sad as it gets, or maybe Prayers for Newtown, is just depressing.
That's like next level, like, just emotional.
But like that's meant to be. It's meant to hit the nail of like, look how bad this is. We should do something about it. But anyway, every song that you think this is just depressing for the sake of being depressing is so bittersweet and introspective that it's kind of optimistic, and it just has an interesting look on life that really makes you think.
This album, I think existential again is a good way to describe it because it's a lot of emotional and impactful moments throughout his life that he talks about. He talks about death of members of his family. He talks about his childhood. He talks about getting signed in 1992 and going on to make music with Red House Painters. He talks about a lot of big and impactful things and what he thinks about those things. And he contrasts all of that with all of these seemingly pointless details that he throws into here.
I think, like, something I'd probably say is, like, as sweet and smooth as all of these songs sound, that the overall tone might be confusion. You know, it's all about him talking about getting old and experience all this stuff, and it's just like, I don't have anything figured out whatsoever. I don't know why this happens to this person and this happens to them. I love my dad, though.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good. I mean, I don't even know what else to say about this record, honestly. Like,
For me, it's uplifting.
I love all the stories. I love when I listen to it. For me, it's like I more experience it as like a roller coaster. It's like hearing about Carissa. I love his interesting story because for me, why Mark Kozlik is so smart is because he knows he's seen a lot of stuff, and he knows he's no perfect human being. It's just authentic. And like, so when we're getting story about a Carissa, I mean, he says outright, he's like, she's my second cousin. I didn't know her very well, but I'm going to her funeral because that makes me feel bad. You shouldn't have to explain beyond that. You know what I mean? And I really super identify with that, like, kind of feeling of like, you don't, and it just makes him so human. And, talking about his parents, even just like talking about like, isn't that weird how Carissa died the same way her dad did? Like, that's wild. That's pretty much what Truck Driver is. Dogs is just him. He's like, relationships are why, it's just him looking back and having a lot of fun with it. And goddamn, like, production wise, this song is like 11 on 10. Like, oh my God, like, it is just mind-blowing. Like, when the drums take so long to come in, and when they do, it's like the perfect moment. He's already entranced you with all these stories that are slightly uncomfortable, but for me are just like,
they're real. I mean, they're awkward, but an adolescent's first sexual experiences are awkward. So it just seems real.
And he talks about the complications as well. He's like, this one girl left me and I was sad. And he's like, but then I cheated on this one girl who cared about me a lot, and I kind of was on the other side, And by the time we get to the end of the song, he's just kind of contrasting. It's that thing everyone kind of thinks about sometimes. It's like it's like I really love them, but like we are animals. It's crazy, and I don't know. And then like the song ends with no conclusion, but it doesn't matter because it feels like it's topped off perfectly.
Oh yeah, Ben's my friend is just a great closer. I love because we've had a few artists that have had songs or topics about like, yeah, we didn't know what to do for this part, so we're just gonna write a song about how we didn't know what to do for this part, and just I think Ben's my friend. And Michaeline is a really good.
I love that track.
That is an underrated song from the South.
Structurally, it's written perfectly. It's just, here's a verse and chorus dedicated to this person.
And then I like how it just shifts and just goes about his grandma.
And it's amazing. Like,
and that's where we get the part that, like, why it's called Benji is because he went to go see the movie.
It's the tiniest little detail.
And it's just like, if you blink, you miss it. Like,
and that's throughout his releases has become the theme. It's like the namesake of the album just comes from some little, just a little quip thrown in, or like something he saw. Like his latest album is named after a SoundCloud rap duo's album tour poster that he saw and thought was funny.
I'm going to say something kind of inflammatory. Is upon my first listen, I was like, every one of these songs sounds the same. But I was listening to it in passing, kind of like doing chores around the house. I just had it playing over the speakers and stuff. So, but it grew on me so much. So I would, if there was ever an album that I've experienced that needs mandatory re-listening kind of deal, I mean, this is probably it. I mean, it's just, and I still kind of feel that way, not like extremely like, I mean, it's not the same chord progression, but I mean, it definitely has that same tone and the rolling kind of picking going the whole time, and it sounds like this dude the whole album, I guess is the best way I can put it.
I think my only complaint is I watched the film, the song remains the same. Just not into, I'm sorry, man.
Wrong.
I'm sorry. I just can't really get, like, I still think it's
one of the best moments in the entire album.
This is so weird because, like, some of my favorite Kozlik songs are, like, 16 minutes, but, like, I think it's a touch long. I really don't
and
like...
That, like, 2-minute just mandolin, like, guitar interlude at the end where they just start jamming. It's so beautiful.
It's still pretty, but like sometimes the finger picking I find like grates on me a little bit during the verses. I think it kind of distracts me more than it enhances the verse.
And I love my dad. I don't know that I've ever heard, now that I think about it, such a like baby light guitar solo in anything before, where it's just the like underneath like the normal rolling of the finger picking, but it sounds really good and I really liked it.
I watched the film, the song remains the same. I love just sonically what he's doing with the guitar, and I love the lyrics on this because it's basically about childhood. Like, it's just taking a historical look, and he talks about some of his earliest memories. He talks about some of his earlier memories as it pertains to music. He actually mentions going to visit Evo Watts Russell, the founder of 4AD, who first signed Red House Painters, which is his friend out near Santa Fe that he mentions. So there's just all those little things, and it kind of highlights why I think this album is so good, because even though I haven't experienced anything that he's talking about specifically, because I'm not Mark Kozelik, we can draw parallels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely felt some nostalgia.
Yeah.
Like by the time it was over, and I was like, man, this ain't even my life.
Right. It makes you think about yours. As Chaz says, it makes you think about your own experiences and kind of makes you put your life in perspective. It makes you think about how everybody around you is experiencing life at the same level you are. And it gets you really philosophical. And it doesn't ever come out and say something poetic like a philosophical statement. It doesn't need to, because it just by the subject matter alone, it kind of introduces the topics, lets you decide how you feel about them on your own.
The last track, Ben Is My Friend, is I read something that it's supposed to be about Ben Gibbard from Death Cab. Is that accurate?
Yep.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's great. I love the sax. I mean, damn, it's great.
And it's a great way to end the album, and it's one of the reasons why I say this isn't a depressing album, because it's about life. Like, you have all of these little things that are what make up life. You have his memories, you have his feelings about music, you have a lot of sad things, but that's because sad things happen in life. And then you close with a normal day in life and all these little minor things like the blue crab cakes he's eating. And it kind of just, it's very reflective. And the fact that it comes right at the end is like an uplifting moment, I think.
What doesn't get said about this album often in discussions I see is like how influential it is. Like how, like these we have stream of consciousness lyrics before this, but like the rambly conversational nature isn't there. And there are a lot of songwriters who are emulating that now.
But there is no other songwriter I've ever seen put so much detail in their lyricism.
Exactly, and he covers so much stuff.
It's kind of crazy how impressive, detail-wise, he goes into these stories.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's not hard to put details in it when you're not trying to make nothing rhyme.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it does rhyme sometimes.
He rhymes sometimes. That was actually a little nitpick I had, but I kind of got over it.
Oh my god,
like,
I knew you would fucking say some stupid shit like that. We gotta stop. I'm gonna tear Chaz's head off. I don't like that it didn't rhyme.
Well,
Songs should rhyme.
Hey, fuck you, first off. Second off, if you actually listen to what I'm about to say, I was first off a nitpick, but I got over it.
I always listen. That's why I'm so mad. Anyway.
Yeah, this is top 50.
Who fucking tonight?
So for me, this is like a top 15 of all time album, because I can keep coming back to it in moments where something major has happened in life, like some kind of shift, some kind of change. You can listen to this album and it kind of just feels comforting. It gets you feeling philosophical. If you're having an existential crisis, this is the music you should be listening to. So this is a solid 10 out of 10 for me. Like, I absolutely adore this album.
I don't know. I mean, that was really a new experience for me. As much as I like folk and stuff, it usually kind of hangs more on like the country end of things or bluegrass or something, just hearing something like that. But I mean, it's at least a hard 8, I mean, I'm definitely going to come back to it. It's going to be around with me for a while.
Yeah, decent to strong 9. Like it's on so many levels, and it's so recent as well. I love that it was released in this decade, and it's just, man, and like what he would go on to do, which is just as good, and in one case even better in my opinion. I mean, my God, like it really is like a huge musical moment. Like this is an album that everyone should hear. A lot of people have heard, but I wish everyone had heard it. Like I think everyone who heard this, it would really just only have positive effects on their life, honestly, for a multitude of reasons.
Totally. I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on Benji.
Oh, wow.
Nah, light to decent 9. This is, goddamn, what a I didn't expect to love this as much as I did.
Strong too.
I feel the strong too. Didn't read the lyrics. Fuck Benji. Fuck Mark Koslick. Fuck Red House Panners. That shit sucks, man.
Oh,
You have a lot of editing to do
Yeah.
this episode.
All right, moving on.
The album I picked is Selected Ambient Works Volume 2 by famed electronic artist Aphex Twin. Aphex Twin is an artist that I've name-dropped so many times on this podcast. It's about bloody time I get to talk about him on it. He's one of my favorite electronic artists ever. His debut, Selected Ambient Works 85 through 92, is a masterpiece.
That's his debut. Isn't that like 3 hours?
No, it's like an hour.
Oh, really? Okay, never mind.
It's
Continue.
one of the most famous electronic albums of all time. It's so
It's
influential.
not the most famous,
Yeah.
really.
It is so influential on today's electronic music. It's kind of wild. His second album in 1994, Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, is a little bit different than his debut. It has a lot of the similar sounds and ideas, but not a lot of beat work. A lot of these are very...
It's like you take all of the beat work out and just leave all of the ambient sounds in.
Sure do.
Aphex Twin is an artist I'm very familiar with. I really like his album I Care Because You Do and Drux. I haven't listened to Richard D. James' album or
Do so.
Cyro. What?
Do so.
I shall. But this is an album I've wanted to talk about for so long. I've heard bits and pieces. It actually features one of my favorite songs of all time. So I'm very interested to see what you guys think about it. I have some things I love about it and some things I don't, but we'll get into it.
This is like designed for me to have never loved it. And it's only because like everything on this show, I feel like I've talked about like what I love in a song is like led up to this moment. Like I'm a vocals, I'm a lyrics, I like kind of thicker
Words?
denser sounds, and these are pretty skeletal. They are.
Now keep in mind,
It's
this
not
was
like they're-
94. So this, if I could just
Yeah,
Some of these were made as early as 85.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
this-
pretty, and that's that's
So
cool.
it's kind of minimal because it kind of has to be.
Well, not necessarily.
I think it's. I mean, I think that's. Would you say, Jacob, that that's challenging for that time? Like, do you think it's something? That
I think some of the stuff here is definitely ahead of its time, like for sure. Like especially some of the more techno-inspired stuff for the mid '80s. This is pretty wild.
And even that, with that in mind, I'm sorry, man. I just can't get into this thing. Like, I only find myself disliking it at points, but I just find myself so vastly indifferent. I just don't think anything here really catches me. I don't think anything here is really mind-blowing. Maybe for the time, sure, but I don't have that context. I've unfortunately had the benefit of hearing some amazing music from the past decade that I really love, and we're at a point where people are making a lot of music now, so we're bound to just make something that's super ahead of the curve or really cutting edge or really new, like kind of but inspired by other stuff, sure, but still its own thing. And for me, like coming to this and on top of it being not my style and as it being an ambient album, it's just I need more sounds. Like I just wanted more interesting mixes to listen to, because some of these are somewhat enchanting, but like most of the time I just find myself indifferent, honestly. And it's not even because of the length. The length just adds to that. By the time I'm through disc 1, I can't sit through disc 2. And by the time I'm through disc 2, I have no desire to listen to disc 1. And when I listen to them independently, I just think they're both okay. I really don't love anything here. I'm really not wowed by anything here. It's not for me. And that's been an issue with a few of the albums we've done for the show that you all have picked. Like, sometimes it just ain't for you. And this ain't it, Chief. Like, I'm just not into this. Like, as much as I listened to it, as much as I tried to pay attention to it, I found when I would take notes on disc 1, I had nothing to say. I almost don't care. And it's not that I'm not interested in Aphex Twin anymore, but I really don't even want to hear the debut. I'm just good. When I go to electronic music, this is not really what I look for most of the time. And I can get into ambient music, but in this case, I just find it to be far too minimal.
All right, before I get into my little spiel, I do want to clarify that I disliked it so much I could not give it one solid listen through. I can only describe it, I guess, as lobby music at a hotel that does not want you to be comfortable. When I think of ambient music, I think about, like some, just tone-wise, like something you could go to sleep to, like some ocean waves, something that's just some noise in the background, and then it switches to like still sort of that, and then what I felt was like sporadic clanging and dings, and I didn't have a good time for the 50 minutes of it that I listened to it, you know.
I love it's just like that's your stamp of approval. It's like a review you see on like a movie. Just quote, "I didn't have a good time."
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
So,
hold on. I haven't gotten to speak yet.
Okay,
Mr.
okay.
John Corn.
chocolate drinker.
This album is great. This is a great album. This is one of the best ambient albums I've ever heard in my life. This is a good album. It's not my favorite, and it's not my favorite of Aphex Twin's work, but it's still, I think, very good. And here's why. This album is 2.5 hours long. It's 24 tracks. Every time a track comes on, I'm like, oh, it's this track. There's that sound. Here's this idea. Here's that synth melody. There's that little really quiet in the background little drum machine beat in a few of the tracks here. And I feel like every single song here, with the exception of just a handful, take that idea and they just do it to its fullest. And even when this track is 7 to 10 minutes long, I never feel the length on this thing. This album, for me, totally justifies the fact that it's 2.5 hours long, and I did not think I would be saying that coming into this. I listened to it 4 times in total over the past few weeks.
You actually gave it like a solid all the way listen through. You told me
This morning I listened to it front to back and took notes on it. And the whole time I was just like, yeah, I'm not really bored of this yet. The first time I listened to it, it was in the background while I played Team Fortress 2, and it was like just, really nice background music.
How do you kill to that music?
Well, I don't know. When like the tribal ambient kind of comes on, like track 4, it sounds like it could be like a Fallout New Vegas soundtrack cut, or like track 5. There are some like darker moments on this thing, but there are also some really, the word that comes to mind is wholesome. Like the very first track, or track 3, they remind me of playing Worms Armageddon on the PlayStation 1 when I was 8 years old. They just have this sense of nostalgia, and it's a borrowed sense of nostalgia because it doesn't make much sense, does it? It just sounds
Yeah.
like
It just
that.
puts you in that mood. If I could describe this sound, like, how would you describe the sound? Well, you ever play Minecraft? That music that comes on from time to time? That's how I would describe this
Yeah,
album.
actually,
in a good way. Like, I like Minecraft soundtrack, actually.
My girlfriend said it was Minecraft music when she heard me listen to it, so yeah.
and the
straight up.
Minecraft soundtrack is great.
I didn't find that at all. I just thought it was, I really was bored. And honestly, it's even when I'm paying attention, like I want to do anything else, honestly. Like every time I listen to it.
Where you said you get nothing out of it, it straight up elicits anger out of me. Like, my first attempt at listening to it, I got about 20 minutes into it, and I was like, all right, I'll try. I'll leave it here, and I'll come back to it later, and I'll just play it from right where it's at. I'm gonna try to get through at least one solid go on this thing, and I'll listen to another 20 minutes of it, and then it's just kind of the same deal. I'm not having a good time.
What about track 9?
I don't know.
The one that's like, boo-doot, boo-doot, boop,
Like-
boop, boop,
like,
boop, boop. That's great. That's honestly like one of, like I can bring it to mind immediately, as well as track 15, where there's just this industrial flavored ambient techno. It's just some of the most well crafted, most finely produced. I love the way the drums sound on this album when there are drums. Like they're
Very
so
little, but
quiet.
when they're there.
They are so effective at
Track 13
setting this mood.
especially, because that sounds like a B-side from
Oh
from
yeah,
the
yeah.
debut.
It's actually it's like a variation on Green Calcs from the debut.
Oh, really?
It's like a more ambient version of it. It's one of the best tracks for sure.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm sorry. I really, like, I wish I had more reasoning as to why, but like, it's really just a visceral disinterest.
Well, like, if I want to...
Even when I- like,
if
when
I
I
want
was-
to put it into perspective, I mentioned this in our Sophie review. A lot of what Sophie was doing, Aphex Twin has done. Not as, like, different or as crazy as her, but there are elements of some of his earlier work that he has done that sound just like what she's doing. Without Aphex Twin, we wouldn't have a lot of modern electronic music today. He is one of the forefronts, especially of that type of genre.
It's similar to our Kraftwerk discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, to put it into perspective, the debut is still the best album, by far. The debut blows my mind that in 1992, he was doing stuff like that.
And in the 80s as well.
Yeah. This album isn't perfect by any means, but just when it's good, it is fantastic. And when it's okay, it's all right. There's never like a low point. The only time, and I think, Brian, you were telling this.
Track 23.
Yeah, track 23 sucks.
That's the one track that I say, like, all right,
and of
I'm
course
ready
it's
for it
the
to be done.
longest. Of course it's the longest song.
Yeah, it would like 11 minutes, and the thing is, it starts like really eerie. It's pretty interesting, and that's how some of these songs get me. They start and they're kind of interesting. I kind of like the noise, but then I feel like they really have nowhere to go, and they just repeat. And I understand that maybe that's not the idea here, but for me, I just don't like that.
But you need to. But if you're paying attention, it doesn't just loop the whole time.
There are
it's
some
not
that do.
looping. It's
True, there's some that do, but when they don't, it's so
I
subtle.
find-
So
There are a
subtle.
lot of subtle little, like, even if it's the same melody, like a slight more distortion on the synth line.
I could hear that dun 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 on track 1 forever. I could that little keyboard dun 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 dun. Oh man, I could see myself like building a house to that in Minecraft.
I listened to track 1, and I do not agree. but I guess I have some Aphex Twin history questions, or just question really. So, all right. So his first album was Ambient Mix Volume 1.
Selected ambient works 85 to 92. And it's
Okay.
way less ambient than this. It's barely, you could barely consider it
It's
ambient.
basically,
a
like
techno
progressive.
album.
It's progressive techno music, like Boots and Cats and Boots and Cat, like that kind of classic, very classic techno.
And then this is his second one. So I guess what is an Aphex Twin concert like?
Okay, so you mentioned this, Tanner, when I asked you what you thought of this album. Listen, listening to this in concert is like when Grateful Dead just jams for 20 minutes. It's the same type of feeling. People come there for the experience of just mellowing out, popping some ecstasy to some Aphex Twin, and just, while he plays his little things over and over.
I would prefer to pop arsenic.
I don't outright hate it. I just really I can understand if I were thinking about this with maybe having heard Selected Ambient 85 to 92.
Because this is completely different than his
I could
debut.
see the 1-2 punch of you get this really ahead of the curve techno piece. It's like, wow, and for the time it's like, this is brand new. This sounds like stuff that's going to be coming out of the late 2000s. And then you get right after that, it's and here's a made with the same instruments but different genre that's also ahead of its time. I get that the 1-2 punch of that was probably amazing, and thinking about it in that context maybe makes it even better. Really, and even though this is the groundwork for that music, knowing that now, it doesn't change anything for me because I really like what came after more.
Now listen, I do not agree that you should have to listen to this all the way through. I don't think it's meant to be. This is definitely a background album. I think it's the opposite spectrum of why Colma's so good. Colma you can listen to in the background, you can listen to it for an album experience. This, I'm kind of surprised that you listening all the way through didn't drop your score at all. For me, it didn't, but I listened to it all the way through first, then listened to some specific tracks. I think this is definitely a pull some tracks from it, and you can come back to it, put it on the background, get some but as a full album, the debuts for that, his other works are for that. This is definitely not that kind of album.
I disagree. I think this album flows really well, and I would say
It's not a slog, though. It is definitely not.
By the end of it, the last 4 or 5 tracks, aren't quite as good as the rest of the album. And then you have track 23, which is 11 minutes long and easily the worst track on the album. But I think it is structured very smoothly.
It is.
And it does work as just a holistic experience.
Like I mentioned, when this album is fantastic, it's really fantastic. And when it's okay, it's okay. But I think my favorite tracks are 1, 3, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20. I think those are when the album really picks up, and I like the album the most when it's melodic and beautiful.
It's so comfy.
Okay, I gotta rave about track 3. Track 3 is one of my favorite songs of all time. God, just that, and then oh my God,
that's the track where I wrote down it feels like playing Worms Armageddon when I was 7.
It is so beautiful.
It's super bittersweet and comfy and nostalgic, and it's I don't know, it's comfy is a word I keep coming back to, but that kind of does it a disservice. I think it's kind of more than that.
What did you think of track 3, Brian? Was that a song that you...
I think disc 1 is the better of the two. I do agree with Jacob that it generally flows. For me, I actually don't really know when tracks change until we're in a completely differently sonic place, and I'm not really paying attention to the track times as I go when I'm listening, just because it tends to be a long enough listen to where I always find myself doing something else while I'm listening to it. but nothing like just like I never like really played games while I listened to it. I just kind of, would work on stuff or whatever. And like I said, I mean, I just mostly indifferent. Like some of it's pleasant, and that's why like the score maybe is up a little bit. Like disc 2, if they're like as a whole thing, 2.5 hours, I think like inevitably you're gonna reach a point where you're kind of like, okay, like, man, I've been listening to this for a while, even if you're still kind of enjoying it, you're like, hey, it's been a long time since I started listening to this. I feel like your brain can't help but do that with something that's like over 2 hours.
That's why I say you probably don't need to listen to it all the way through.
I didn't really feel like I lost anything. At one point I did listen to disc 1 into disc 2. I just didn't realize it had changed, but I stopped at that point because I was just I was like, okay, I don't want to hear it anymore, and I don't want that to affect my opinion, to just force myself through it. And I guess that's another high point for it, and it's really weird because like my high points are just saying things like, hey, I never felt like I was forcing myself to listen to it all the way, because I really didn't. It's just that when it was on, I just couldn't find myself getting invested. I don't really find it to be that engaging or beautiful or even like comforting. I just find it to be okay, honestly.
And I hate, man, to keep dumping on this, because you've
do it.
You've shown me music not in relation to this show that I still listen to at home. I mean, I know you listen to music that I like. All right.
What an elitist thing to say.
It's like I was scheduling to listen to this album was scheduling to ruin that section of my day. I couldn't even put it on and do something while I was in the background, because I tried that and it ruined whatever I was doing. I was just uncomfortable the whole time.
Really that bad?
To me, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
There's a Patton Oswalt line that says, there is music that I like and there is music that I do not listen to. And it comes from, I used to be kind of a turd about a lot of music and just be like, oh, it's poser stuff or, whatever. But like, and I would like actively hate it. But now I'm more of that line, just I like what I like, and then I just don't listen to something. That is the first thing in a decade that I have heard that has made me feel those old middle school, high school hate towards music. Wow. I mean,
oh man, how low
Sorry.
can you go? I want you to give your rating last.
Sorry, but like Clockwork is a hype beast. It's overrated. Like, I don't give a shit about his knee. He can break his legs for all I care.
get another shitty knee surgery.
Oh, he chokes on his tubes again.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah,
I hope he makes a whole nother album just so I can shit all over it
Yeah,
again.
nice breathing, dude. And,
Wow.
anyway.
Nah, it's okay, man. I knew this was going to be a controversial pick from day one since I was thinking about picking it. It's just I've always wanted to experience this album, and I've always wanted to talk about this artist on the show, because I knew if I went the debut, that would be I've already done my easy pick. I did Slint. This would have been like the easiest of the picks to do, because his debut is just mind-blowing. And his other works are good too, but this is an album I wanted to listen to and talk about, because I think it is interesting how polarizing it can be, how someone can really love it and really hate it, because there's a lot to dig through with it. And I think I like it a lot, and there's some moments that I love a lot. And Jacob will probably score it higher than I will, but I've been going back and forth, like, I don't know what I want to do. Strong 7 to a light 8. Like, on the best days, like a light to decent 8. And on the days where I'm just kind of putting it on for certain tracks, because this track 3 makes it a 7 immediately. There is no other song I've ever heard that made me feel so nostalgic and comfortable than that song. When I'm just feeling so stressed, that's the song I put on. This might be like the album I put on if I'm feeling like, or Coma or albums like that. But there are moments like track 23 that I'm like, why is this here? Come on, Aphex Twin, you're better than this. So I think that's in the ballpark, because there are days where this could be like a masterpiece to me. But there are days where I'm like, this is okay. Like, and I really like what I'm listening to.
I'm going to go with a decent to strong 8 on this album. I'm just absolutely taken aback by how much I ended up enjoying it. I would put Substrata by Biosphere above it as far as Ambient goes, and like maybe Apollo by Brian Eno. Those are the only two that come to mind ambient albums that I enjoy more than this, like straight up ambient, not like ambient techno or whatever. This is just a very, very well-made album, and despite it being 2.5 hours long, I never really got sick of it.
Elbow gets a light 6.
I just feel like...
Not a 5. Elbow gets a light 6. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I really can't say I'm feeling more than like a strong 5. I really, like, even with context, it doesn't improve it for me because I'm just really not into the style of music. Like, I maybe there are some, I'm into bits of ambient. Like, ambient as a style is not worthless, obviously. I like elements of ambient, but, like, just pure ambient, as far as this album goes, like, no. I mean, I don't hate it. It's not bad. It's not garbage. It contributes. But, like, if, pure personal enjoyment, I get none. And, even though I don't hate it, I don't love it or barely like it, honestly. I just could really take it or leave it.
I'm going to give it a 2.
Woo! Yeah!
Because I'm sure there's still somehow worse music.
Hell yeah. Woo! I'm glad you went real low. I'm glad you went so low with it.
I mean, if it's personal taste, yeah.
Yeah, just a 2. No, hell yeah, dude. Fuck it. Light 2.
This has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. We've been here with a guest, Tanner Boyd.
Thanks for having me.
I am Jacob Lindberg. I was here with Chaz Jenkins.
Oh, man.
And Brian Courtney.
It's clipping, bitch.
Hey.
And
Bye.
we'll see you next time when we do another sequels episode. It's one of our favorite kinds of episodes to do. I think we'll be revisiting Beat Happening. We previously listened to their album Jamboree, and now we're going to listen to their final studio release, You Turn Me On.
Ooh. It's time to end this Pain trilogy. We are going back to our fan favorite band, Pain, with also their final studio album, Full Speed Ahead. An album I think is going to end on a high note for this train ride we've been doing through this band's discography.
That's like the highest stakes for me, that episode. For me, it's like I need to come in here like a professor.
I think it'll end well. I really think, from what I've heard.
God, I hope. There are 3 albums I really wanted to do this for this episode. I wanted to, maybe do, because we were doing Benji, so I maybe wanted to cover As Common as Light, but it's a really long release. I kind of wanted to do Clipping's next album because it's thematically completely different, even though there's a lot more risk taking on that album that I think would really be interesting to cover. But kind of want to know what you guys think of Saturation 3 as well, because I was surprised at the reaction to the first one, and I think the third one would land a little better, and I might even, and it's been a long time since I've gotten to visit that record, so I think that'd be a lot of fun. Like, up to this point, I actually haven't decided. I was really thinking about all 3, but
Just all 3.
no, we'll do all 3. I think I'll just go with Saturation 3. I think it's the one I have the most personal connection to, so it'd make for a good discussion.
This has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. We'll see you next time.